Welcome to the New Mom Talk podcast, your go-to podcast for evidence-based answers to your burning questions about parenting. Join us as we dive into commonly Googled topics and hear from experts and real moms. Let's navigate parenthood together, one question at a time. Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about sleep abnormalities and when to ask for help. So I'm really stoked for this episode because I feel like sleep training has been a constant topic in social media where people are either so against it or so for it. And as I say with every one of my episodes, I just want to be able to provide every parent with the information and in order for them to walk away with what they need. So sleep training is not for everyone. Sleep training is definitely for some people. It worked for us. That said, I do have Michelle Connor with us today, who's going to talk a little bit more in depth about sleep abnormalities, which is going to be very important if this is something that your little one struggles with, and being able to ask for help. So a little different from sleep training. That said, I'm going to hand it over to you, Michelle, if you can tell us about yourself and your business.
Yes. So my name is Michelle. I'm in New York. I have 2 kids of my own. I have a 3-year-old and my son is 15 months. I'm also a teacher. I teach science in high school in Brooklyn. So very busy. So I'm a pediatric sleep consultant. So I do regularly work with families that want to sleep train. And I also work with newborns where we don't formally sleep train. We work on kind of just building foundations and routines. But again, like you were saying, sleep training is a very hot topic. There's a lot of misconceptions about sleep training. But I think the biggest thing is there's such a hard yes or no, but no one really knows when and why or when to ask. There's a lot of things that affect sleep that are not behavioral, that are medical. Now, again, I'm not a doctor, but these are kind of trends that I've seen working with clients throughout the years.
I love that because, yeah, it is true where when you have a newborn, you're so exhausted. You think sleep training is going to help your, 6-week old. So it's really obvious, probably not the best time to consider sleep training. So I love that you are going to be talking a lot more about some concerns that you have seen and when this might be a good time for parents to seek help, whether it's from a sleep consultant or maybe outside of a sleep consultant and a medical professional. That said, let's just kind of start off with the basics. Can you share some common signs that you typically tend to see with sleep abnormalities in infants or little ones that parents should maybe keep an eye out for?
So the biggest ones start at the newborn stage. So there's a difference between sleep being affected because of not having a good routine or having too long of wake windows where a child's overtired, and then something else that's going wrong. So once you know that you have an age-appropriate schedule, you're building foundations, and there's still issues going on with sleep, that's how you know that there's generally something else going on. So our biggest one that I see all the time is a dairy and or soy intolerance. This is huge. A lot of pediatricians, I have noticed the kind of like older, more traditional pediatricians tend to just say it's colic. It might be reflux, or they might do Pepcid, but keep you on the same formula or tell you not to change your diet as you're breastfeeding. And then some of the younger kind of newer pediatricians are noticing there's a big trend in higher uptakes of dairy and soy intolerance in kids. It's actually crazy. Like the numbers compared to a long time ago. Both my kids were dairy and soy intolerant. I was breastfeeding, so I just had to change my diet. So I had to cut out all dairy and all soy, and both of them, it took up until 8 months before they were okay. So usually the big signs that we're looking for the high pitched cry. There's different cries of newborns. The biggest one, there's a high pitched, I call it a pain cry, and excessive kicking of their feet when they're laying flat. And then you also look for mucus in their stool. So mucus in their stool is kind of like that sticky stool. It almost looks like there's like boogers kind of in their stool. When you open their diaper, you see kind of strings or signs of like little blood spatters. A lot of times you won't see the blood spatters unless they have a really serious dairy intolerance, but you'll notice the mucus in the stool. Eczema is another big indicator, and the inability to lay flat.
So it's interesting that some of that really is kind of more of like a diet elimination, depending on if you are nursing and just kind of seeing what it is that you are eating that can potentially causing these discomforts in your little one.
Yep. There's also like there's different formulas. So that there's like the formulas that cut out dairy and soy. Like Nutramigen is a big one. That's usually the first one they go to. Pure Amino is another one. Alimentum is another one. So there's so many options. And the thing is with the dairy intolerance, the second you eliminate the dairy or soy, it's like night and day of a child. It's crazy. And I always feel so bad when I get clients later on, like 2, 3, 4 months in, and the child's constantly awake. They're constantly scream crying. They don't know why. Their pediatrician keeps saying it's colic, or they're giving them Pepcid and it's not helping. And then you cut dairy out, and within a week, it's like a completely different child. And they start sleeping so much better because they're not in so much pain.
So it's almost like that preventative instead of like, let's fix something. Maybe let's figure out the cause.
Yeah. So that's literally the first thing I tell any of my friends that have kids. I'm like, look for these signs. If any of these signs are coming up, ask the pediatrician to run a stool sample, because that's what you would do is you'd bring a stool sample to the pediatrician and they test it for blood. And that's generally the indicator for like a dairy or soy intolerance.
How can like parents differentiate between, say, typical newborn sleep patterns and potentially some issues that really are going to require some help, whether, again, it's from a sleep professional or a medical professional?
So other than kind of that dairy issue, which is one of the big ones medically, a big common newborn cycle is reverse cycling, where they're up all night long partying and sleeping all day. And this one is so hard to break, and it's so common, so people think it's normal. There's a difference between what's common and what's normal and what has to be. That is very easily fixable if you know how to fix it. And while it's going on, you'll be talking to other newborn parents. You'll be on all these Facebook groups, and everyone will say, my newborn does this too. My newborn does this too. So it feels like, okay, this is normal. And this is just part of struggling as a parent, because everyone, you decided to be a parent. This is what you just have to deal with. But what we're seeing is if they're up all night, it generally means that they don't have a great daytime schedule. So being able to fix the daytime schedule, so not letting them sleep longer than 2 hours during the day, making sure they're getting nice full feeds in during the day, that'll get you into a better place at night where they're waking up just to feed and going directly back to bed. So that's really the key indicator for overnight sleep of a newborn. Are they waking up to feed and going directly back to sleep? That's what we want to see. In many cases, they wake up for a feed and they're up for hours. Now, that's something that if you talk to a sleep consultant and you do some research about good daytime schedules, that's easily fixable. Again, it's fixable within a couple of days even. But it's just so common that people feel it's just normal. Like you just have to deal with it because you decided to have a baby.
Oh, don't we just love that? It's common.
I can't tell you how many people say that. They're just like, oh, well, everyone said it's, it happens, it's normal, and you just have to deal with it. And I'm like, but you don't. Like, it's okay. We can fix it.
I know there are so many resources and supports nowadays to be able to help parents with all of these common but not normal issues.
Same thing we usually see. So if you go a little bit past newborn stage, you have like your between 4 months to a year. So generally between 4 and 6 months, you could generally see feeds get cut out of the overnight in general. So they can go the length of 12 hours, 10 hours without feeding. In many cases, again, because it's so common, there's kids that wake up forever through the night. And there's kids that are in the 12 months, 16 months, 18 months, and they've always woken up. And what they do is parents generally will feed them to sleep, and then they go back to sleep. But what happens is it affects their daytime calories. So they're getting too many calories at night. Again, we're reverse cycling. So you get too many calories at night, not enough calories during the day, and then they're up hungry at night. So just like us, if we had a big snack instead of eating dinner, we'd probably skip dinner because we're not hungry, but then we'd wake up at like 2 and be like, oh, I need a snack really quick, and then go back to bed. But if you do that all the time, then that's just your habit.
Makes sense.
So that's even something like simple where you're just making sure that you're not necessarily sleep training, but making sure you have appropriate daytime schedule is the number one fix for most sleep issues that are not medically related. So as a sleep consultant, I have never had a client whose schedule I did not have to adjust. So that's usually the first step that we do, is we adjust the daytime schedule to make sure that our kids are getting nice full feeds and appropriate wake windows during the day, even if they're on a schedule. So not having these long gaps between naps is really important
That's
through all
comforting
ages.
and encouraging to hear, right? Something that it's fixable and you just might need a little bit of support from a sleep consultant.
A lot of them are really fixable. People don't even know that something so small can make such a big difference. In most cases, some people don't even have to sleep train as once they fix their schedule.
So I know you're not a doctor, but given your profession, I would love to be able to talk about some red flags that you see that might indicate that they probably do need to see a health professional. For example, maybe excessive daytime sleepiness, or maybe difficulty staying asleep. Anything that you're like, this is not really within the work of a sleep consultant. You need somebody in the medical field to help you.
So usually what we see, if they are unable to lay flat, no matter what you do, generally you want to see a medical professional. It could be a sign of reflux or, again, a digestive issue. If they are snoring, that is a sign that they could potentially have sleep apnea, even at a young age. There's a difference between like babies just kind of sleep with their mouth open and have a coo, but a true snore should be brought to your pediatrician's attention, because it could be sleep apnea. Waking up gasping, like almost like shocked out of sleep. You kind of hear that like in their voice when they wake up. Again, that could be a gasp for air. That could be a sleep apnea related issue. Throwing up about an hour after each feed is a really, really serious one that is missed often. So if your child's taking little low ounces for their age, so if they're on the lower end of the ounces and they're throwing up within an hour of eating, like not spit up, like full throwing it up, that could be a really good indicator of, what is it called? Polystenosis. Pyloric stenosis, there it is, pyloric stenosis, which is a contracting or tightening of one of the sphincters in their stomach. So they're not getting nutrients in their stomach and it's just coming out. And that requires surgery, actually. I actually worked with a client whose newborn had that. And how we figured it out is we adjusted their daytime schedule and the sleep didn't get better. We adjusted their feeding, and no matter what they did, they changed the bottles. They put him on a special formula. He would not take more than like 3 ounces at a time, and he'd started throwing up often. So he had the mucus in the stool. He had the inability to lay flat, up frequently no matter what, whether it be daytime or nighttime. We checked off kind of the dairy allergy. We fixed that issue because usually your first go-to is the dairy. After that, we were still seeing these issues, and there's just something just felt off about it. And we were noticing that the throwing up was happening about an hour after each feed. And this mom was constantly covered. Like, it wasn't like spit up, it was like full throw up. And I was like, tell your pediatrician that something is wrong. And they went and they sent her right to the hospital to get an ultrasound of their belly. And then they can see the tightening of the pyloric sphincter. And he got surgery. Like, they rushed him into surgery within the same day.
Wow. Feeling like your 15-minute prenatal appointments don't give you enough time to prepare for birth? You're not alone, but you don't have to figure it all out yourself. That's where the She Births Bravely childbirth course comes in. In just 20 minutes a day, you'll learn how to cope with contractions, make labor easier, and fuel your body with the right nutrition. Plus, taking a birth class builds confidence, strengthens your bond with your partner, and even reduces the risk of a C-section. I'm using it myself as a second-time mom, and you can too. Sign up through my link at shebirthsbravely.com/newmomtalk and get a free I Love Mom onesie and teething toy for your little one. Well, see, this is good that you have like a professional to be able to help you with these different concerns, because I feel like as a parent, a lot of the stuff you do put up with just because you're like, it's the newborn stage, especially if you're a first-time parent. You have no idea what to expect. You read about the sleep regressions, right? Or, oh, they're a newborn, it's fine. They're supposed to be waking up this often to feed and whatnot. And sometimes it really is something that's deeper than that.
Yep. And it's one of those things, again, that like you have to trust your gut, because pyloric stenosis is not super common. So it's not regularly diagnosed. So they try everything else before you'd even consider that, because there's so many other things with similar symptoms that, like, at some point went to the pediatrician 4 or 5 times over this, and they changed her formula, added Pepsid, upped his Pepsid, told to go to GI, and then we were still seeing this, and the two of us were just like, something is wrong. Like, trust your gut and like advocate that you feel that something is not right. And she even talked to like a different doctor in the practice, and they were just like, I absolutely hear you, and this is what we're going to do. And sometimes you just have to advocate for yourself and your child, and it's okay for you as a parent to be wrong, but it's not great if a doctor's wrong. So if you're worrying and you think something's wrong, you're better off having them check and it be nothing than nobody check and it be something.
Yep, very good points. So I feel like you might have already answered this question about at what point should parents really consult a pediatrician or a sleep specialist if their baby is really experiencing those frequent sleep disruptions, unusual sleep behavior, waking up constantly. Let's say first time parents, they have a newborn, waking up 6 weeks out still every couple of hours. Like what are some red flags that a parent should be like, you know what, I just need to probably reach out to a sleep consultant to start and go from there?
So if you notice that they're staying up for very long periods of time, whether that be during the day or even at night, so if they're staying up for like hours at a clip, that's problematic. So you want to make sure that that's usually a key indicator that there needs to be some scheduling adjustment going on. And then the same thing, if they're not able to lay flat, it could be because they're overtired and just cranky and not used to it, or again, it could be medical. So those are the two big ones. So are they staying up for hours, and are they unable to lay flat for an extended period of time? So sometimes kids will lay flat for like 10 minutes, but if they can't sleep flat for at least 2 hours, then you'd need either a sleep consultant or probably medical help.
That's a good kind of number to think about.
2 hours is a good one. And then people are like, well, they just want to be held or they just want to be comforted. And that could be true, yes. But if you never put them flat, you don't know if you need to look for those red flags medically. So that's one of the big things that come up where, and even still, it's like you're practicing safe sleep. So if you're falling asleep holding the baby, that's not necessarily safe sleep, and that could be dangerous in the long run too. So you kind of have to find that balance of like, are you comforting, but then also giving the ability to figure out if there's a underlying issue.
So you did mention sleep apnea and reflux earlier. Let's say you have a client whose little one has one of these conditions. What would be either the treatment or the interventions that would be available to a parent from your perspective that you would say, here's what maybe the next steps are? Or would the next step be consult your pediatrician?
So you definitely, anything medical related always goes directly to the pediatrician. That being said, I work with people that have children with reflux all the time. So like an easy thing we do is we move their last bottle earlier in the night, so it's not butted up to directly when they're laying flat. So it gives them opportunity to digest it a little bit better. Sleep apnea, I've never worked with a client who had sleep apnea, but again, that would have to be signed off on by the doctors. With reflux, not so much, but if we have a child with like weight issues or feeding issues, then we would need a sign off from a doctor who's watching them to make sure it's okay to sleep train or it's okay to work on these things. They don't have to wake up after X amount of hours through the night.
Well, my last question, do you have any other tips, suggestions, or recommendations?
So definitely the biggest thing is focus on the daytime schedule. Whether you have a newborn to a toddler, if your naps are not in the right place or they're not getting enough daytime sleep or getting too much daytime sleep, that's going to affect your overnight sleep. And that's generally the easiest fix to make on your own. So it does get tricky because if you Google, let's just say a 6-month sleep schedule, you're going to get 50 different ones, but they generally have the same trends. So you can accommodate them to your life. So for instance, there's a lot of schedules that go 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I personally am not getting up at 6 a.m. if I don't have to. So I don't do that for my kids. My toddler is on an 8 to 8 schedule and my son is on a 7 to 7. So I always get independent time with each one of them. one in the morning and one at night, and you're never having to do 2 kids at once. So for multiples, that's definitely one of my favorite tips. If you have multiple kids, put them an hour apart so you get independent time with both of them, and you never have to put both of them down at the same time or get them up at the same time.
Yeah, those wake up times are definitely tough. That was kind of what we used as we need to drop a nap. If our little one was waking up at 5 a.m., I'm like, oh, okay.
So funny that
drop a nap.
It's one or the two, which is hard because undertired and overtired have the same symptoms sometimes. Early morning wake ups, 90% of the time, the child's overtired. They're not getting enough sleep. Occasionally, like 10% of the time when I work with clients, it's time to drop a nap. But in most cases, if kids are waking up very early in the morning, it's because they're overtired. So bring bedtime earlier, not later.
Oh, that's interesting. Now my son, he has the same bedtime, which is really nice, but he was waking up. I want to say for like the 1 day, 18 months, it was that struggle of like 5 a.m. wake up calls. Now we're back to a normal schedule.
Yeah, it's finding that sweet spot of where you're putting that. If they're down to one nap, that's the hard part, is where you're putting that nap. Are they getting enough sleep? And then what happens if they don't? So if they don't get a 2-hour nap between we don't usually like to cut to one nap until like 15, 14 months, but sometimes daycare make you cut at a year. So once you're up to like 18 months, if they're not getting 2 hours sleep, bring bedtime in like a half hour earlier in order to accommodate from them not getting enough sleep during the day. And actually that earlier bedtime will let them sleep longer. It's like kids' math just doesn't math ever.
I know, right?
Never. You get a 10-minute nap in the car on the way to Target, you're up for 4 hours. You get a 2-hour nap, you're up for 10 minutes. It just doesn't make sense sometimes. That was me the other day trying to keep them up. I'm like singing, I'm clapping, I'm dancing. It's like trying to keep them on schedule is so hard sometimes. And then sometimes you just get stuck in the car and that's okay too.
Yeah.
If that works for you. Sometimes that works for me. I'm just like, okay, you fell asleep. I'm staying. I'll watch something on my phone for a half hour. Keep everything the rest of the day fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have all of your information linked in the show notes. So if anyone wants to reach out to you or contact you, they can that way. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
And chatting about this.
Yes, I'm so glad we get this information out because there's not enough information on like what to look for. So I'm really glad we did this one.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. You can find us on Instagram for more updates and tips. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and give us a review if you like us.